In the heart of the Amazon, surrounded by giant trees and rivers that wound like serpents, there existed a village forgotten by time. The houses, made of straw and mud, spoke of simplicity, but the nature surrounding them told another story. The residents murmured about an ancient curse, a living shadow that hid among the leaves, waiting for the full moon. Clara, a young teacher, had left the city in search of peace, but the dense forest brought with it mysteries that science could not explain. Since her arrival, Clara felt drawn to the natural beauty, but was certain there was something more in this land. The nights were filled with a deafening silence, interrupted only by howls echoing in the distance. Stories shared around the fire revealed a supernatural being, a creature that had become legend, but wandered the forest with malicious intent. On those nights, the faces of the villagers darkened, and their gazes averted as if to escape their own fear. On the first full moon since her arrival, Clara felt a chill. She sat in her room, grading tests by the flickering light of a lantern. A guttural noise reverberated through the dense darkness, making her home feel like a prison of panic. The sound seemed like a call, an ancient echo promising revelations about the secrets of the forest. Fear washed over her, but at the same time, an overwhelming curiosity drove her to discover the origin of those dark notes. Trembling, Clara pulled back the curtain and looked out the window. The darkness grew thicker, as if the forest itself were breathing. The trees seemed to lean in to listen, and the howl resonated louder, as if it wanted her to follow. Mustering her courage, she put on her coat and stepped outside. The path was narrow and winding, but the moonlight guided her, transforming the landscape into a stage of dancing shadows. As she advanced, the howl became an irresistible siren song. Clara was aware of her neighbor's warnings, but the call was stronger than any advice. Following the sounds reverberating among the trees, she saw figures moving in the darkness, indistinct shadows surrounding her with hungry stares. She sat at the edge of the precipice that separated the clearing of the forest from the village, wondering if she should continue or turn back. Upon reaching a moonlit clearing, the atmosphere changed. The howling ceased abruptly, and a deep silence took over the place. Clara took a deep breath, sharpening her senses. The feeling of being watched was palpable. Before she could process what was happening, a colossal figure emerged from the shadows. It was a vast wolf, not merely an animal, but the embodiment of an ancestral spirit. Its eyes sparkled, ignited by the pain and wisdom of a forgotten era. Clara froze. In a mix of fear and awe, childhood memories flashed in her mind when she had listened to tales of guardians of the forests. This creature was real, a presence of primal strength and sorrow. She remembered the legends of the betrayal that had turned this being into a cursed monster. With her heart racing, she felt an urge to understand. Despite the terror surrounding her, she reached out with compassion. With hesitant steps, she approached, her desire to communicate stronger than her fear. Clara spoke softly, hoping her words would reach the spirit before her. She mentioned the reprisals the forest had suffered at the hands of humans, the destruction that spread, and the promises that nature would always fight back. Looking into the wolf's bright eyes, she saw the sadness contained within, an echo of its pain and loneliness. The wolf, in turn, let out a howl, not of attack, but of despair. Clara felt the forest's energy pulsing around her, as if everything were connected by an invisible bond. A sudden desire overtook her. She needed to make a promise. If she could protect the forest, he would no longer have to howl in solitude. The connection had to be real, and her words would seal a pact between humans and the spirits of the forest. The creature tilted its head, as if it understood her intentions. Clara realized she had the chance to change not only the villagers' perception of the forest, but also the very essence of what this being represented. She promised to care for the forest, to teach children to respect nature, and to never forget the legends surrounding it. The wolf seemed to weigh her words, the light in its eyes intensifying. In the following days, the howls ceased. The forest became calm again, and Clara gained recognition as a fervent defender of the environment. People began to listen to her stories and value their relationship with the land. Gradually, the warm whispers of legends echoed among mothers telling stories to their children, and ancestral traditions began to bloom like the flowers of the forest. But something changed in the atmosphere. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that the wolf was still nearby, a watcher who had promised to protect her in exchange for her commitments. One night, as the stars shone like fragments of gold, she felt the creature's gaze. A shiver ran down her spine, a mix of fear and recognition. Something deep within her stirred. Protection was at stake, but the threat of the curse loomed large. As the full moon approached once more, Clara noticed a change in the villagers' behavior. People grew restless, and whispers about the wolf faded into murmurs of discontent. One day, an old resident urged Clara to remember to be cautious, that the force of nature could also wear a terrifying face. He spoke about how protection was important, but how easily one could lose the trust of what had been promised. With a heavy heart, Clara decided to investigate. She ventured into the forest, calling for the wolf, her words echoing among the trees, trying to discover where he was. The howling began to rise again from a distance, as if calling for her, a resonant warning that could not be ignored. Shadows seemed to intensify around her, and the air grew cold. The weight of the curse filled that space. As she ventured further, Clara felt the eager gazes of the beings in the forest. They were no longer shadows of the past. They were restless spirits, filled with pain and betrayal. She realized that while the villagers had begun to respect nature, there was a part of the story being ignored, the suffering of the cursed spirit that needed to be freed. It was then that she heard her name whispered among the rustling branches. The creature appeared before her once more, but something was different. Its once bright eyes, filled with pain, now seemed dull, as if its essence was fading. The wolf, once imposing, looked smaller and more vulnerable. Clara felt a surge of protectiveness, her heart aching with the realization that perhaps she had failed in her promises. The villagers' concerns began to take shape. The spirit might be unhappy. The wolf emitted another sound, this time a pitiful lament. Clara tried to approach again, but a magical distance seemed to weaken. Upon closer inspection, the wolf's claws appeared to transform into those of a monster, the intoxication of a being overwhelmed by despair. A transformation began to unfold before her, and Clara understood that the curse wasn't just against the wolf, but something deeper. A cry escaped her lips. "You are not alone." But the spirit seemed further and further away. It looked at her with an expression that mixed faith and despair, as if it had chosen her to help it. But now time was running out. Clara felt powerless, as if the bond they had created was being shattered by fate. In a final effort, she similarly asked forgiveness from all the spirits of the forest, offering her own essence to free the one who had become a cursed wolf. As her words left her lips, silence was filled with a profound power. The forest emitted a glow, a light emanating from the very earth. Animals began to surround her, whispering the themes of a rebirth. But then pain settled in, and Clara realized the spell could be broken, but she would need to make a sacrifice. The spirit approached her again, and Clara sensed that something dark might result from her decision. As she extended her hand, the wolf was about to transform. The forest's magic flickered in its veins, but Clara knew the outcome could destroy the village and the very spark of hope she had ignited. She hesitated, but the wolf's light enveloped her, and the connection strengthened. It was a sacred union of opposing forces seeking to reunite in the shadows of destiny. The wolf began to transfigure, a visceral transformation unfolding before her eyes. The fur disappeared, and the monster's form twisted, reshaping into a lost essence. Clara understood there could be a path, and the path of sacrifice might leave her lost in the forest or lead her to save the creature. She felt herself being pulled into the transformation. When the light finally dissipated, Clara found herself not only as a woman, but as a part of the forest itself. The change made her feel the energy of nature, the pain, and the compassion of life pulsing beneath her feet. The spirit of the wolf resonated deep within her soul, and both felt one with nature. But at the same time, she felt freedom. A distorted scream echoed in the distance, a reminder of what was at stake. The sacrifice had been accepted, but there were consequences. Elements of the forest began to stir like a storm, and Clara realized the world she knew might not be there when she awoke. Before she could process, the atmosphere turned dense, and the howl became a cry of pain and chaos. Clara, bound to the wolf's fate, struggled to understand the fracture opening before her. Now, the transformation resonated. She was not just a guardian, but also a symbol of transgression. A battle with nature itself arose amid the mists. The villagers who once paid attention to her stories were now lost, desolated by news that deemed the wolf a threat once more. They reverted to old superstitions, and the shadows in the forest grew denser, the creatures ready to summon what could become a being of darkness. As Clara tried to defend the being she had become, a new era of fear erupted. The villagers were now ready, prepared to hunt what had once been revered. Clara walked through that darkness, and there was no answer to the legends. As she sought to protect, her own life was at risk. During her endeavors to catch sight of the creature in its gentle form, she felt the storm of her connection intensifying. The forest became a battleground. Clara didn't necessarily want to follow the instincts of war, but the voices of the trees cried out for protection. The creature's appearance led to a union of shadows and light, and as the hunters, the chatter among the villagers armed themselves, grew in number. She knew the time for change was running out. The full moon's light began to dim along the flame that radiated from the wolf. In a final effort, Clara decided to confront both the villagers and the spirits that challenged her existence. The wolf could not be just a mere beast, but still a lost guardian seeking its way back. However, as she approached, she saw the hungry eyes of the hunters reflected in the darkness of the forest. This was a warning that the line between life and death was thin, and perhaps the wolf was destined to become a conflicted spirit. A confrontation arose. The wolf, now closer to being cursed than a guardian, became an icon of all unresolved fears. Clara screamed, pleading for the hunters to stop, but the forest's clamoring roared loudly against her pleas. Thus, the connection became warfare, and the voices of nature demanded their share. The heavy rain began to fall, as if the earth wanted to grow and heal deep wounds. A cycle that seemed final, but fate lingered once more. The clamor of life and death revealed itself, and Clara sought the true nature of sacrifice. Confronting the darkness, she saw a massive wolf covered in shadows. It roared, not just in pain, but with an expectation of liberation, and its form twisted again. Clara realized that what should have been the final opportunity for freedom was now becoming an escalating curse. Its eyes, now in a whirlwind, reflected the anguish of a hastening fate. And then everything went silent. The wolf disappeared into the shadows of the forest, and Clara found herself alone before a precipice. What would happen to her? A shadow hovered over her essence, and as she gazed at the dancing forest, a distant howl still echoed. What should have been an ending was becoming an eternal cycle of terror and redemption. The forest kept its secrets, and Clara, wrapped in mystery and despair, inseparably united with the spirit of the wolf, found herself trapped between two realities, with no link to a definitive end. The true terror had only just begun,